Adab and welcome to the Mango Lounge. We have someone with us today whose introduction was very hard to abbreviate. He is Pakistan's nuclear physicist and an activist particularly concerned with the freedom of speech, secularism, scientific temper, and education in Pakistan. We have none other but the brilliant Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy. Born and raised in Karachi, Mr. Hoodbhoy studied at the MIT for 9 years, eventually leading to a PhD in nuclear physics. In 1981, he went on to conduct a postdoctoral research at the University of Washington. He has been a visiting professor at the Carnegie Mellon University, at MIT, University of Maryland, and at Stanford Linear Collision. He remains one of Pakistan's most prominent academics. He is the author of Islam and Science, Religious Orthodoxy, and the Battle of Rationality. He heads Mashal Books in Lahore, which claims to make a major translation effort to produce books in Urdu that promote modern thought, human rights, and emancipation of women. He has written innumerable times for the Project Syndicate, for the prestigious Dawn newspaper in Pakistan, the New York Times, and the Express Tribune. He is generally considered one of the most vocal, progressive, and liberal members of the Pakistani intelligentsia.
Welcome to Mango Lounge, Professor Hoodboy. It's a pleasure. We are in awe that we are in your presence. We've been looking forward to this conversation. And as a segue into launching this conversation, I want to tell you about what we spoke about the last time Sophie and I were together, which was the pig heart that was transplanted rather successfully into the chest of a man whose own heart had failed him. And we were, very, very happy that this immense bit of progress has been made in the world of medicine. But what we heard about the way this incredible accomplishment was received in Pakistan, that led to a lot of dismay because, Pakistan has a track record of treating its science community rather poorly, or what little science community there is. So we thought we'd bring you into this conversation and get your views on what might be going on with regards to why religion seems to meddle so much in the way science is conducted in Pakistan and across the world.
Well, thank you very much. I'm awed by your introduction, not all of which was accurate, but we'll let it go. I was at MIT as an undergraduate for 4 years and then 3 years as a graduate student, but those are small things. The larger issue is that of the relation between science and religion. And it's been a hostile one in Christianity, certainly. You spoke about the pig's heart. Well, that is much, much later. So let's go back 400 years. And this is before the scientific revolution. This is the time of the Enlightenment. And there were enormous taboos surrounding the human body. Now, 400 years ago, you have this French philosopher by the name of Rene Descartes. And Descartes made a very profound observation. It started out with inanimate bodies, but then he extended it to the human body itself. And he said, we're all made up of parts. To understand the whole, we must subdivide into parts. And so, in the case of the human body, our parts are hands, feet. We are levers. This is a lever. It's nothing more than that. This heart inside is a pump. And although all sorts of mystical notions are associated with it, dil hi to hai na sang wo khisht, that sort of thing. Lekin, well, it's basically a mechanical object. So now, fast forward 400 years, we're finding that that is absolutely true. The heart of an animal is a pump, so is the human heart, a pump. And so it's a matter of fixing up the plumbing and then immunorejection. That the fact that a foreign body is rejected by our immune system has to be dealt with very carefully. And so the way, I mean, you people know it much better than I, that you have to then suppress it using immunosuppressants. And if you do too much, then the patient dies of some disease because he becomes so vulnerable. If you don't do enough, then the rejection takes over. But the point is that there's nothing in the heart that's anything more than cells. Cells are a collection of molecules. Those molecules get their instruction from the DNA how to form proteins. And in this case, the pig heart was first DNA sequenced, and then using what is called CRISPR technology, some genes were spliced out of it. So it's a matter of technology now. The fact that it was a pig heart, I mean, who cares? It could have been a donkey's heart. One of these days, the pig heart will work. I mean, this guy died, Bennett, whatever. But one of these days, the pig heart will work. Some other animal's heart will work. And the fact is that we humans are machines.
So, what led to the FDA approving this pig heart transplant was the fact that the team that was working on this project for the last many, many years, actually led by this very handsome young man from Karachi whose name is Mansoor Mohyuddin from Dow Medical College. He had successfully transplanted a pig's heart into a baboon about 4.5 years ago, and that baboon is actually still alive. So it was after seeing that success that the FDA agreed to allowing this pig's heart to be transplanted into a human. And the pig, obviously, as you pointed out, had been genetically sequenced. He actually turned off four genes in the pig out of 30,000 genes that the pig has. Four were turned off, and six were actually kind of turned on, so to speak. This is very lay terminology that I'm using. So उसका नतीजा ये हुआ कि मिस्टर बेनेट 2 महीने से ज़्यादा जिंदा रहे after this, and obviously, a very successful initial attempt. Refinements are needed, and they will come in due course. लेकिन अगर पहला रिस्पांस ही जिस तरह के पाकिस्तान में देखा गया कि जितने भी मौलवी हजरात हैं उनके पेट में जोर का मरोड़ पड़ना शुरू हो गया कि जी ये कैसे हो सकता है, पिग का हार्ट लगा दिया इंसान के अंदर। तो इस मौजू पे आपको कहीं पे होप नजर आ रही है कि कोई चीज बेहतर होने की
हाँ
टेंशन है
हाँ
आपके
हाँ
यहाँ?
हाँ, इसमें कोई परेशानी की बात नहीं है। देखिए, जैसे जैसे साइंस आगे बढ़ती है, वैसे वैसे जो लोग साइंस से नफरत करते हैं, वो भी उसके समर से, उसके फल से इस्तेफादा करते हैं, बहुत शौक से खाने लगते हैं। अच्छा, अब ज़रा ये देख लीजिए कि आज से मेरे बचपन में ब्लड ट्रांसफ्यूजन पर भी ममानियत थी कि इससे नस्ल खराब हो जाएगी। आखिर जो अच्छे नस्ल के लोग हैं उनका खून अच्छा होता है। और जो लायंस क्लब एक होता था कराची में, मुझे याद है ट्राम पट्टे के बाद उसको बंद करना पड़ा इसी वजह से। ब्लड डोनेशन को एक बहुत गलत चीज समझा जाता था। सो लुक इट्स or now look at other kinds of organ transplants, eyes, corneal transplants, which is routine. But corneal transplants happen now at various places in Pakistan. It's a sad thing that we don't get enough donors for corneas. We don't get enough donors for kidneys or for livers. They mostly come from Sri Lanka because there's this fear that if a person goes to heaven incomplete, then he or she won't have all the fun that he could have. In fact, I've heard some Maulana Hazrat say that if you give your eyes away, then how will you see the hoods in heaven? तो ये तो फिर
It's very important to
वो
us.
लालच तो
हाँ, तो देखिए इसमें कोई परेशानी की बात नहीं है। Look at the fact that printing was considered haram until until the 17th century. The first printing that happened in the Muslim world happened in the 17th century, long after the Gutenberg Bible. And why did it happen so late? It was because there's this resistance that no, this is not written in the books anywhere that you can print. And so this is natural resistance. And don't think that this is just in Islam. Look at what happened in Christianity for centuries. So there was resistance even to the idea that the world was round. Very interesting theological objections to that. The objection was that अगर दुनिया गोल है तो फिर यहां पर क्राइस्ट का आना होगा और फिर उसके बिल्कुल मुकाबिल भी उनका आना होगा, तो दो क्राइस्ट हो गए, दो यसु मसीह हो गए, ये तो मना है. And so the conclusion was that the earth is flat. And this goes back to the time of Saint Aquinas 1,000 years ago and didn't change until just 400 years ago. So look, over time, all these resistances will even out.
It takes me to a question I've been wanting to ask you, and in fact, I would love for you to comment on this. Uh, is it possible to be scientifically oriented and still be very religious?
That is possible. In fact, somebody I knew rather well was exactly that, and he was the greatest scientist that Pakistan has produced, Abdul Salam, and yet he was passionately religious. But he was, I'd say, a total exception. Well, I wouldn't say a total exception, but most scientists today prefer just to let science go its own way, religion go its own way. They prefer not to have any kind of interaction between the two. But if you ask me whether it is possible, the answer is yes. It is not common, though.
So I remember seeing, in fact, we talked about it last week as well, that there was somebody who surveyed all of the physics professors in all of the universities in the US. And they found that the vast, vast majority, something close to 90%, proclaim themselves to be atheistic. So that obviously goes with what you're saying. Um, I remember a conversation years and years ago. In fact, I was just fresh out of medical school at the time. And I know you know Professor Iqbal, the late wonderful Professor Iqbal Ahmed, very well. तो कॉलेज ऑफ फिजिशियंस एंड सर्जन्स इन पाकिस्तान इन कराची हम बैठे हुए थे उनका एक लेक्चर था तो आई had the opportunity to talk to him वो ये कहते कि we live in modern times throughout the world and yet are dominated by medieval minds वो generally बात कर रहे थे but obviously with special reference to Pakistan तो अभी रिसेंटली मुझे वो स्टीवन वाइनबर्ग का भी एक कोट याद आया जिस पे कि कुछ लोगों को तकलीफ हुई थी he said and I'm reading his quote verbatim. For 40 years, I have not seen a single paper by a physicist or astronomer working in a Muslim country that was worth reading. So this kind of somewhat flies in the face of what you just said. You seem very hopeful about the way things are moving in Pakistan in particular and the Islamic world in general. Uh, I am not that hopeful because I find that we are. We don't seem to be heading in the right direction. पाकिस्तान के किसी भी एस्पेक्ट से देखें आपकी टेक्स्ट बुक्स उठा लें और जो इतना ऑड किस्म का रिलीजन बच्चों को सिखाते हैं छोटी नन्ही उम्र से तो उससे ही उनके जहन बंद होने शुरू हो जाते हैं एंड दे फाइंड सो मेनी इम्पेडिमेंट्स टू फ्री थॉट that that portion of the brain that needs to learn to ask questions. And I'm actually speaking in scientific terms. There's empirical data showing that children that are force-fed religion in their early formative years tend to lose the ability for critical thinking. So एक तो वही ये प्रॉब्लम है ऊपर से society has become so religious मेरे ये देखते ही देखते इतना फर्क पड़ा अब आपके प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब वो मुमलकत खुदादाद मदीना पे बेस्ड मुमलकत बना रहे हैं वो शायद कोई पोस्ट डॉक्टरल स्टडी शुरू करवाना चाह रहे हैं रूहानियत के लिए मैंने सुना था
Sufi University.
हाँ सूफी यूनिवर्सिटी और हाथ में उनके हर वक्त तस्बीह होती है जो कि वो चल रही होती है जब वो गुफ्तगू भी कर रहे होते हैं, very, I would say, behangam displays of religiosity in settings where you don't normally see such behavior. So आपने तो जनरल से बात की कि you're hopeful that things will change, and things were horrible all over the world, but all over the world for hundreds of years ago, at least in the Western world, people learned the value of being able to separate out religion from critical thinking and from science and from the functioning of the state. Is there anything particularly unique about Pakistan, about Islam, that makes that impossible? And how is it that 2 billion people in this world are producing nothing right now?
Okay, first of all, let me clarify. When I said I'm hopeful, I'm not hopeful of the immediate future. We have to extend the time scale from the next 10 years to the next 100 years, maybe the next 200 years. But this is a trend of humankind, and it's an irreversible trend. As we see rationality in our lives, as we see science enter in deeper and deeper ways, there's no way of avoiding the inevitable conclusion. So even the Maulvi today has no option but to use his 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 phone, his smartphone. In fact, the Maulvi who used to say कि तस्वीर कशी हराम है, आज वो अपनी सेल्फियां लेता है.
That's
वो
very interesting.
जो ये कहते थे कि सूद सूद से बुरी चीज कोई नहीं, जिना से भी बुरी चीज है रिबा, आज वो क्रेडिट कार्ड्स इस्तेमाल करते हैं. बस उसके ऊपर कोई लेपा पोशी पोशी की है, उसमें वो कहते हैं कि दिस इज क्या शरिया कंप्लायंट क्रेडिट कार्ड. अरे भाई वो क्या चीज होती है. और तो और,
Exactly that.
आज पाकिस्तान के कानून में अगर आप कोई गुलाम रखना चाहें, वो मना तो नहीं है ना इस्लाम में, तो आप नहीं कर सकते. इस ममलिकत खुदा दाद में आप यहां पर गुलाम नहीं रख सकते, वो खिलाफ कानून होगा. तो जब मैं ये कहता हूं कि हालात बदले हैं और बदलेंगे और बेहतरी की तरफ जाएंगे, तो उसमें ये शवाहिद मैं आपके सामने पेश करूंगा, क्योंकि इससे आप इनकार नहीं कर सकते कि वो तमाम चीजें मना हैं, लेकिन फिर भी यहां अब होने लगी हैं. सूद सूद के बगैर कौन सी इकोनॉमी चल सकती है. एक दिन भी चलाकर देखिए, अगले दिन ठप हो जाएगी. सो इट्स गोना हैपन, and it is happening. But you see, the resistance is enormous, and so it's look at Pakistan. We say we don't have resources for giving good education, that we don't have enough scientific equipment, that we don't have enough universities, etc. But look at those Pakistanis who live in the UK. Unfortunately, a big portion of them, particularly those who live in cities like Birmingham and Bradford, they choose to live in Britain with a mindset that is essentially derived from home, from Pakistan. And so they will not integrate with the rest. They will not learn science the way that British kids will learn. And the result is that you'll find lots and lots of Indians in every field of science, and you will hardly find any Pakistani who makes it to a university job, to a professorship. In fact, if you were to count the number of professors of physics or chemistry or biology or mathematics in all of Britain or all of the United States, probably end up with less than 20. And I mean, look, that's pathetic. It's because of the attitudes that we bring to science. The attitude to science which makes it grow is curiosity, open-mindedness. Say that we learn as we explore the universe, that knowledge is created, it's not revealed. Knowledge is created, and that's something that we haven't as yet accepted. देखिए, उर्दू जबान में कोई लफ्ज नहीं है तख्लीक इल्म. तहसील इल्म है, इल्म हासिल करना है। तख्लीक इल्म की नहीं हो सकती, क्योंकि वो तो ऊपर ही से आती। तो ये वो रवैये हैं जिन्हें तब्दील करना होगा, नहीं तो हम लोग बिल्कुल फंस के रह जाएंगे।
Do you think, Dr. Hoodboy, that our educational system is direly lacking in promoting critical thinking amongst our youth, starting from the elementary school level? And perhaps it may be a combination of our educational system as well as our, religious orthodoxy, that has stopped our scientific development, where we have now come down to this level of a catastrophic decline from a time where Muslim mathematicians and scientists were ahead of the game.
I, I like the word you use, catastrophic dysfunction. It is exactly that. Here we absolutely shut our minds to what science is telling us. Let me give you an example. In every book that is taught in biology, there is an introductory chapter in which, and these are government textbooks here in Pakistan, and they tell you over there, yeah, you will learn Darwin's theory of evolution, Darwin ka nazariya irtaqa. But don't believe it because it's wrong. It's nonsensical. And in fact, I have a book with me, in this bookshelf somewhere over here. The very notion that simple organisms can make complex organisms is rubbish, says the book. And then it goes on to say, ये इतनी ही बेवकूफ़ी है जितना कि ये समझना कि अगर दो रिक्शा आपस में टकराते हैं तो उनसे गाड़ी बनकर निकलेगी. So three wheelers, when they collide, can't make a four wheeler. So now this is what they're teaching to kids. And so do you think that Professor Mohyuddin would ever be able to do gene splicing with this kind of biology background? This is mind blowing. So it is this kind of thinking that Imran Khan has been promoting. And by the way, I should say that what he's done is terribly dangerous. He has converted Pakistan's public schools into madrasas. If you go to any school in across the road over there or there, all over Punjab, kids are being supervised with Maulvis from madrasas, and this didn't happen before, who are just who are just crushing those kids under the weight of learning the religious scriptures. कुरान पढ़ा रहे हैं पूरी तजवीद के साथ, और ये मौलवी वहां पहुंचे हुए हैं. ख्याल तो ये था ना कि सिंगल नेशनल करिकुलम का, कि साइंस पहुंचाई जाए मदारिस में. मदरसों के लिए कोई साइंस टीचर्स नहीं रखे गए. जो आम स्कूल्स हैं पंजाब में, 1 लाख मौलवी उसके लिए भर्ती हुए हैं. 1 लाख मौलवी. अब आप ये सोच लीजिए कि उसका असर क्या होगा हमारे बच्चों के ऊपर.
Professor, is this only in Punjab या पूरे मुल्क में है?
You see, Sindh has resisted it because Imran Khan and Zardari, they have, they don't get along very well, and Sindh doesn't like to be ruled by Punjab. In in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, this is partly true over there as well. In fact, it is largely true. Balochistan, I don't know very much about. I I can't comment on Balochistan, but certainly in Punjab, in my neighborhood here, in Chakwal, in Bhai Peru, everywhere that I've gone, this is what I've seen.
But ye to, I mean, as a Pakistani American, and I have to admit, I was not even aware of this until you just brought it up. मगर ये तो बहुत ज़्यादा मायूसी की बात है, और ये सुन के तो दिल बैठ जाता है. इस किस्म की religious orthodoxy अगर हम लाएंगे, it completely blunts out the learning curve. I mean, children at that age have to have very proactive learning that is actually an all-inclusive education. And I'm not sure,
Yeah.
for a province as robust as Punjab to have 1 million Maulanas, who
One
have now
one
been
hundred thousand, not 1 million. Ek lakh.
1
1
lakh.
million.
I'm sorry, yes. I mean, that's a very, very big number, you know.
जो प्रोफेसर हुड बॉय, ये जो कशमकश है ना रिलीजन और साइंस की, ये तो हमेशा से चल रही है, मेरे ख्याल से चलती रहेगी। इसकी एक एग्जांपल ये भी है कि अमेरिका जो है ऑब्वियसली साइंस के लिहाज से काफ़ी एडवांस्ड है कंपेयर टू द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, एंड मोस्ट सर्टनली कंपेयर टू द इस्लामिक वर्ल्ड। लेकिन ये जंग यहाँ पे भी लड़ी जा रही है इस वक्त। ये जो आप कह रहे थे ना, ये डार्विन की थ्योरी के बारे में, ये तो अमेरिका में भी ये जंग चल रही है और हमेशा से चलती रही है। इट्स गॉन टू द सुप्रीम कोर्ट, यू वुड हैव थॉट कि सेटल हो गई होगी बात, लेकिन अब फिर से वही नॉनसेंस जो है, स्पेशली ये बाइबल बेल्ट के नीचे वाले जो स्टेट्स हैं अमेरिका में, वहाँ पे रोज कोई ना कोई लेजिस्लेशन आती है कि डार्विन की थ्योरी स्कूल में नहीं पढ़ानी चाहिए, एंड दे वांट टू टीच something so thoroughly stupid as intelligent design as an alternative to Darwin. So वो तो है सही है, लेकिन I would like your opinion on why it appears to, at least my eyes, that there's something about Islam that makes it particularly impermeable to science. क्योंकि एक तो हमने कहा नहीं, 1000 साल पहले for a couple of 100 years less कुछ पर्शियन साइंटिस्ट थे जिन्होंने के बड़े कारनामे किए, बट आई फील कि उन्होंने दे डिड ऑल ऑफ दैट डिस्पाइट इस्लाम एंड नॉट बिकॉज ऑफ इस्लाम, बिकॉज उन सब की शामत ही रही जितनों ने भी कोई अच्छा काम किया वो। लेकिन उसके बाद से तो आफ्टर गजाली तो सब कुछ ही ख़त्म हो गया। फिर मेंस में बाइबल छपा 15th सेंचुरी में, 200 साल के लिए मुसलमान मुल्कों में किताब भी नहीं आ सकी बिकॉज सम इडियट ऑटोमन एम्परर डिक्रीड के जी उसकी आपको, आई एम श्योर यू नो द स्टोरी बिहाइंड दैट डिसीजन कि क्यों नहीं प्रिंटिंग प्रेस यूज़ कर सकते जो यूरोप में इन्वेंट हुआ है। इसलिए कि कुरान तो सिर्फ हाथ से लिखा जा सकता है, उसको प्रेस पे प्रिंट करेंगे तो उसकी बेहरमती हो जाएगी, इसलिए प्रेस होना ही नहीं चाहिए। तो ही जस्ट बैंड इट ऑल अक्रॉस द ऑटोमन लैंड्स, एंड फिर मुगलों ने भी उसकी यू नो कॉपी की, और इंडिया में भी फॉर द मोस्ट पार्ट अंटिल क्वाइट अ बिट लेटर वो प्रेस नहीं आया। So मुझे ये बताएं कि after that needlessly long preamble, is there something unique about Islam? Because Islam does centralize authority. The chief of the army staff is the same person who is the chief of the state, and he's also the chief of the church, so to speak. तो क्रिश्चियनिटी जब आप इनलाइटमेंट वगैरह की बात करते हैं या उससे पहले उनकी रेनेसांस की बात करते हैं, उनमें ये कॉन्सेप्ट था ऑफ सेपरेटिंग स्टेट फ्रॉम रिलीजन पहले से था। जीसस की इनफैक्ट एक सेइंग भी यूज की जाती है कि गिव सीजर हिज ड्यू एंड गिव गॉड हिज ड्यू एज टू सेपरेट एंटिटीज। इस्लाम में ये सेपरेशन नहीं है। डू यू थिंक दैट perhaps this centralization of all authority in the hands of the one Amir al Mumineen might have something to do with why Muslims have been in steady decline since Ghazali came about?
Well, look, here is a fundamental question: who speaks for Islam? In Christianity, there was no such issue because the Pope had divine authority. The Pope was infallible. The Pope could never make a mistake. And so, even if he said that the earth is stationary and the sun goes around it, you had to believe him. In Islam, that is not the case. Who speaks for Islam? We don't know because the Holy Prophet did not leave any instructions as to who should follow him. He did not, he never spoke about a state. And this Riyasat Madina business is something that's been invented. The Prophet did not create any administrative set up over there that was to be replicated in future times. He did not say who would head that state. He did not lay out many things. So he was a spiritual head of Muslims. So then after that, it's an open question. Who should you believe? Which of the Khulfai Rashidin should you believe? And what was their succession to power based upon, and so forth. So these issues have never been resolved. Now, what happened was A century and a half after the death of the Holy Prophet, you had the Muslims encountering Greek civilization. You had them looking at the works of Plato, of Aristotle, of Democritus, of Pythagoras. Those were incredible treasures of learning. And this all happened in the courts of Khalifas who were enlightened, who thought that they were Muslim, but that Islam doesn't mean that you close your minds to what others have done. And so when we say that Islam doesn't allow this or it doesn't allow that, it's all a matter of who speaks for Islam. And those people like Harun al Rashid, spoke for Islam in those days. That's the difference. Let me come back to your earlier comment. You said you have a bunch of nutcases in the Bible Belt. Actually, I went to the University of Missouri. I gave some talks over there, and I was quite astonished by the number of churches over there. And I was also astonished by how religious people were in the physics department over there. But Missouri isn't a great university. University of Missouri isn't a great university. It's okay. If you look at the scientific elite of America, the ones who actually make discoveries, the ones who make transplantation possible, the ones who can look at signatures of the Big Bang, for example, or look at micromaterials, those guys don't believe in this stuff. They're completely out and out professionals who have managed to keep science and religion apart. And so they may not care very much about religion, but they don't waste their nights dreaming about this issue. They have a job to do, they keep doing that. And that's the way it should be, I think.
We've had a wonderful conversation with the brilliant Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy today. We are going to put this into different segments. Stay with us, and we will bring you the part 2 with Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy. See you soon.